Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Aaron from CTS and we'll get started.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So first of all, thank you very much for coming along to today's webinar. I think we've got a great session lined up with one of our clients, Seddons, and Mr. James Temple. So my name's Aaron. I am one of the directors at CTS, and I've personally been working alongside James and Seddons for a couple of years now, providing a cloud solution. And my team has been working closely with James's team to help develop an IT strategy. And I've got a bit of a role today facilitating this session, so hopefully that goes according to plan. So like I say, Seddons have completed a huge amount of work over the last few years on several projects. I think a lot of those we're going to talk about today. And the transition has been fairly seamless into remote working for them, and I think that's an important thing to touch on. But COVID has put agile working at the top of the agenda for the legal sector, as we all know. So we thought now is a great time to invite people along and to invite Seddons along to share their story. The session should last about 20 minutes. I'm going to ask James several questions. There's a Q&A session at the end. But if you do think of any questions as we go through, feel free to drop them into the chat window and we'll pick them up as we go along, or we'll catch up with them all at the end. So hopefully that covers off what we're doing today. So without further ado, let's get started. And the first question, James, could you kindly introduce yourself, your firm, and tell us about your role at Seddons?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. So, as Aaron said, I'm James Temple. I'm the COO at Seddons. We are a West End full-service law firm. We're about 130 odd people that provide legal services across a spectrum of specialities. So my role at the firm is really responsibility for all non-legal aspects of the firm's operations. I'm tasked with driving efficiency, reducing costs, and ultimately making sure we deliver a good profit margin across the business. As part of my remit, I also cover IT. So I'm responsible for defining and overseeing delivery of the firm's IT strategy. So that's really a quick summary of me and my role at the firm.
Lovely, thank you very much. So as we said, James, we're going to focus on a couple of steps that you and the team at Seddons have taken over the past few years to try and make yourself and the firm more agile. I think a good starting point, could you maybe tell us about some of those things that you've already done to date to drive agility?
Yeah, sure. So as I say, you know, I have various things that I'm responsible for in my role. I think one of the key parts of what I do is implementing the firm's business strategy. So over the last year or so, a big piece of that strategy has been based around getting our infrastructure in really good shape. So that's not just infrastructure in terms of technology, but also infrastructure in terms of support and how we deliver our legal services. So there are two really key parts to this that we've implemented prior to us finding ourselves in this situation. One of those is the technology piece, and we've been on a journey to make sure that we are server-free and fully in the cloud, which we have completed probably 12 months ago. The second part of that strategy is around legal support, and actually we've just completed, towards the end of last year, a outsourcing project. So now all of our support services for the legal departments are outsourced to a third party based out in South Africa. So those two things combined means we're in a really good position in terms of how we deliver our services to our fee earners and how they can get the support that they need. Going forward, part of our strategy was very much focused on working in a much more paper-light way, implementing agile working techniques and functionality across our business in order to further drive down costs. The view, once we've done that, we'd really be able to look at our office space and our use of that space with a view to reducing our footprint in the West End, which is obviously very expensive, and facilitating people working at home. So clearly the situation we now find ourselves in has accelerated some of those things, which is, from my perspective, hasn't been a terrible thing.
Lovely, thank you, James. So you did go into quite a few specific areas then about your technology strategy, and I'm sure we'll cover off some of that as we continue to progress. But one of the big questions that I've got is, obviously this COVID situation has forced everybody to now work from home and adopt all this new tech that you've put in place. So were there any challenges or unexpected issues for you, your team and your users when you had to force this transition?
Well, from a technology perspective, probably very little actually. So we didn't have to train people on new ways of working. We didn't have to train them on new systems. That was already there. So the environment, the infrastructure that we created just carried on as is. And from a user perspective, it's no different logging in from the office as it is from home. Same environment, same set of applications, same environment. So they were very familiar with that. Probably our biggest challenge has been around behaviour and culture, and getting people used to ways of working at home. So one great example I've got is we've got a 72-year-old fee earner in our property department that's probably been into the office every day of his life for the last 40 years. He surrounds himself with paper and was very used to working in a specific way. You could set your watch by the time he got in and left every day. And all of a sudden, he's not allowed in the office. His whole world had completely changed. So he's now sitting at home with a laptop, with a printer next to him, because that was a step too far, coping without any paper whatsoever. But he's happily working away. He's doing what he needs to do, and he's productive and is producing the work that his clients demand. So, culturally and behaviourally, that's been our biggest challenge. But even he was able to log in and was used to the environment once he was logged into the system. So, for us, that's been the biggest challenge. Things like Zoom and Teams have been instrumental in us keeping people together and communicating with another, collaborating. We have a daily newsletter that goes out to staff to let them know what's going on. And our managing partner's been great. He sends out an email on a daily basis, just telling people what's going on and keeping everyone up to speed with what's happening in the office or across the business.
Lovely. Sounds good. So lots of projects, an easier way for you to adapt to what's going on. How different would that have been for you and the team at Seddons if you'd have not done the projects to date that you've just spoken about?
You know what? I mean, I do think about that, and I really dread to think. In our old environment, we had one old remote access server that probably would have melted by now, and it would have been all hands to the pump to figure out a way of coping with the situation. I think part of our strategy was very much focused on this has to be the way forward. People working remotely, people working from home. So we have to make sure we've got an infrastructure to support that. Had we not moved to this environment 12 months ago, we would have been in a lot of pain, and we would have been really struggling, and it would have been all hands to the pump to get us up and running and working over the last few weeks. So it fills me with dread just thinking about it. So I'm pleased we've moved to the world that we're currently in.
That's good. You told us a little bit about some of your end users and your colleagues, how they've adapted to it. What about your clients? How have they adapted to Seddons working in this remote capacity?
Well, we've been very careful and very clear with our clients to make sure that, as far as we're concerned and as they're concerned, it's business as usual. All of our fee earners are available to work in the same way that they would. So we've gone out of our way to communicate that very carefully to our clients. Obviously, the big thing that's changed is the face-to-face aspect of it, and we're not able to meet them. There's been a few regulatory things around onboarding that we've had to scramble to deal with, but by and large, they've been very good about it. They're in the same position as us, so they fully understand. We're doing lots of meetings over Teams and Zoom. Obviously, there's been a few issues around Zoom recently, and how secure it is. So we've been careful to make them aware of the challenges around that. But all in all, they've been very accommodating. As I say, they're all in the same position as us. So it hasn't been a huge impact on on our clients from that perspective. It's been pretty good.
Good. Okay. So obviously, it sounds like it's been a easier journey for you and for Seddons. I think we've all heard stories about some firms that are maybe struggling right now to enable their users to do what you and Seddons are doing. If you could give any advice to those firms today, what advice would that be?
Well, really, I think at the moment it's all about getting through this period. So you really have to do what you do in order to get your users connected and working remotely. I would suggest that if you're still struggling with that, you probably need some advice, and quickly. So without plugging Aaron directly, there are vendors out there that do this sort of thing for a living and are very able and willing to help. So if you're still struggling, I'd suggest you get on the phone and start looking for some experience to help you through this. At the moment, a big focus for us is around cost saving and actually getting through this period relatively unscathed. Spending large amounts of cash at the moment on infrastructure projects would not be top of my agenda, but if you need help, then I would pick up the phone and get on with that as soon as you can. The other point, I guess, is that once we've got through this lockdown period, you really need to seriously start looking at reprioritizing any projects and objectives that you had, and really consider what your focus is and what your priority is going forward. This has made us all think differently about how we operate and where we spend our money and the types of projects that we have that are upcoming and what needs prioritizing. But for us, certainly there's lots of lessons that we've learned through this period, and we are very much going to implement some new ways of working once the lockdown is eased and we get back to any form of normal life.
Yeah, do you think it's going to be a big change in the way that Seddons work in the future because of what's gone on?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've learned through this that people are very capable of working in new ways, and when forced to change, actually they're very good at doing that. People are capable of doing a lot of things very differently without the support that they've been used to. We've been forced to strip out cost from our firm, as I'm sure lots of other firms have. We've furloughed lots of staff. And our fee earners are coping and getting on with it without that. So certainly there's some lessons to be learned. I think one of the key things is when we do get back to any sort of normal is to make sure people don't revert back to the ways that they used to work, and actually we embrace some of the new ways of working that we've been forced to implement. For us, our strategy was already around reducing the amount of space that we have. So I think one key lesson for us is that actually, if we work a bit smarter and maybe redesign our office into a more agile workplace, we could potentially have less space. So people have proved that they can work effectively from home. So that's absolutely something that we're going to embrace and implement going forward. It's demonstrated that we can be more agile and people can be flexible. So that's something we'll look to carry forward going forward.
Okay, and what about the actual legal sector and the wider impact on what's been going on, the way firms have reacted, and the future? What are your thoughts on that impact?
Well, I think it's not just the legal sector, or any professional service business. What this has taught them is we really need to look carefully at our cost base and seriously question how we operate. Big chunks of cost around people, support, office space, travel. These things really need to be considered. Also need to look at how we communicate with clients and our colleagues. Do we need to meet face to face as much? There are other methods that we've all got very used to over this period. So all the things that we've kind of taken for granted and just become the default position, I think this situation has really taught us that doesn't have to be the norm. And there are other ways of conducting ourselves and our business going forward. I think also if you look at some of the public bodies that we work with, like the courts and the land registry, I think we really need to question how they operate and the fact that they've got to change the way that they work. They're a limited things that they're doing at the moment, but I think that needs to be seriously considered going forward around working in a much more electronic way, and that has to become the norm going forward. Makes life much easier for everyone and can also help us drive down costs significantly.
Right, great. Thank you, James. We have had some questions come in, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a couple of those out and you can then respond. So one question, we still receive a lot of paper from third parties. How is this dealt with in a paper-light, paperless team?
Yeah, it's been it has been difficult, and as a firm that do a lot of property work, again, we receive lots of hard copy paper that we have to deal with. So what we had to do, and it was a bit of a scramble when we were first forced into lockdown, was we quickly got within each team key members that had some hardware at home. So we deployed multifunction devices to one member of each team to make sure that they were able to handle paper that came into the office, and also producing paper that has to go out in hard copy form. So we've redirected posts to various people's houses who then deal with it remotely from home. So it's been difficult, but we're now set up with the capabilities to deal with that.
Okay. Another question we've had, what changes have you had to make in light of the security concerns around Zoom?
Well, part of our move to the cloud was, in fact, the first thing that we did probably 5 or 6 years ago was move to Office 365. So obviously, as part of that, we use Teams. So really, we push Teams as much as we can over Zoom, especially considering the concerns around Zoom. And we're, where clients are forcing us to use Zoom, or that's their preference, we're making it very clear to them that there are limitations around security. And we need to be very conscious of that when we're talking about confidential aspects, and limiting that as much as we can.
Okay. Next question. How are you going to approach or change working practices over the next few months, as it's likely to be a minimal return to the office? I think you've covered off some of that, but if you've got anything else you want to add, I think you did cover some of that.
No, well, I just think given the situation that we've created and the capacity we now have for everyone to work at home effectively, if it's a gradual, return to work, then if we have to do some sort of skeleton workforce in the office where we rotate people in and out on a daily, weekly basis, we're in a really good position to do that. We've proved that we're more than capable now from working remotely en masse. And we can gradually introduce everyone back to work over the course of the next few months as hopefully things start to ease off.
Lovely, and I think there's one more. I've heard that some firms are reconfiguring their space now so that people cannot come back to how it was. What are your views on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. It would certainly shock a few people when they return to work and their office looks very different. We will take our time, but it's absolutely part of our strategy going forward that we will look at our space and reconfigure it to utilise it better, move away from everyone having individual offices to a much more open plan space, and people will have the ability to work at home, introduce hot desking, and really change the environment that we have within our office. That's definitely going to change going forward.
That's all the questions that have been. Sorry. That's all the questions that have been shared on the chat. Has anybody got any other questions that they want to ask before we wrap this up?
I think there is actually one more.
One more that's come in around how we access our applications and data. Is it VPN or hosted desktop? We use a Citrix environment, which is super secure. It's also boosted by two-factor. So we have a environment where people logging in from outside of the office have to use a two-factor tool. So not only do they do that, but they go through a Citrix environment. So it's super secure, super stable, doesn't require a huge amount of bandwidth from an infrastructure perspective. So again, it's an environment people are used to and no different working from home as if they were in the office. So it's worked very well for us and is really secure and reliable.
Okay, I apologise for missing that one. So I think that is the last of the questions. So if anybody else has got anything else, oh, here we go, one more. So how many people do you think will be able to work from home 1 day a week after this in your firm? Or 1 day a week plus after this?
I think we'll probably look for pretty much everybody to be able to work at least 1 day a week at home going forward. We've absolutely proved that it's possible. Obviously, there are some staff, receptionists, and people that are very much office based. But those apart, certainly from a fee earner perspective and a large chunk of our support staff, there's no reason why we can't have any number of people working at home, 1-2 days a week. We've proven it's possible, and from a agile perspective and helping us drive down cost perspective going forward, it's very much something we want to embrace. So it's as I say, from my perspective, it's been a real plus being forced into this world, and it's proven that a lot is possible.
Absolutely. So that may be it on the questions. If anybody's got any more, feel free to ask them. If not, I think we have come to the end of the available time. Now, I want to thank you all for attending and everybody who contributed with questions. And of course, James, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your feedback. So for everybody listening and watching, if there's anything that you're interested to hear more about, you can get in touch with CTS. Our email is hello@cts.co.uk. If you mark that for my attention, our marketing team will pass it on and I'll make sure you get the information that you need. One last little bit of advice that CTS have put out there is, we know lots of firms may be experiencing some technical issues with remote working. So we've actually set up a COVID-19 helpline for the legal sector, where you or your technical teams can actually come direct to our consultants at no charge. It's just absolutely free of charge advice and support. That's available on our website, which is cts.co.uk/COVID-19. It's an online chat where you can actually get through live to one of the consultants. So if anybody in your team is struggling, or you know anybody else that's struggling, please feel free to share that advice with them, and hopefully we can help people through. So again, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much to you and the rest of the team at Seddons. And I think that's it for today.